talked to a CEO a year ago who said that he had no other choice but to set up his company because he had become progressively unemployable by doing what he was curious about. And so I took I stole the line, but I'll steal this one because indeed I feel like I can't explain myself. But so the last name is Pultio, comes from Finland, and it is nothing to be pronounced in the American language, don't worry about it. But the reason why I'm here is I left Boston Consulting Group to do things that I found much more interesting. Let's see how much of a BCG there is in 10 years once AI has its way with it. There's an interesting Wall Street piece on it just a couple of days ago. There's a textbook, AI for MBAs, that's coming out, and all the universities you hear, I'm an adjunct there, so I'm the worst type of professor. No one's put a ring on it yet. But so here we are in conversation with two people who've actually done things in the area, and you see what we were supposed to talk to, and we'll do exactly that. The brief said what's working, what isn't, all of it. Maybe because you have introduced yourself a bit, they know you. So Alvin, shall we start with you and a bit of an intro to you and what you've seen work, and maybe that's the first round we do here.
Sorry, what do we see?
Yeah, so you introduce yourself, and then what have you seen work at AWS?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alvin Huan. I'm on the market development team for financial services with a focus on generative AI and machine learning. What I've seen work, look, I think there's a number of use cases that we've seen been very, very successful within kind of the hedge fund, the capital market space. It's around kind of some of the research workloads, and we've seen evidence of that from customers like Bridgewater, from Valley Asset Management, and several others. Anything to do with the call center, around call center transcripts, post-call analytics, real-time agent assist, right? We've seen some successes there. And actually, we've seen the same kind of transformation and operating model that Silas was talking about with penetration testing on the cyber side, is that if you think of the calls when you call into a bank, right? Your call is recorded for quality assurance purposes, right? Financial institutions used to only be able to review 1 or 2% of those calls, right? And it's really a sampling-based approach. With large language models now, they can review 100% of those calls and really move to an exception-based approach, right? So it's a change in operating model, very similar to what Silas talked about on the cyber side. And then there's a whole bunch of other compliance use cases, like around compliance investigations, anti-money laundering, things like that. So there's no lack of use cases, I think. And even Silas mentioned, right? He has hundreds, if not thousands, of use cases within Morgan Stanley. Industry-wide, there's certainly no lack of use cases.
There will be work to do, for sure. Yes.
Can I add to that? Maybe just two things. I'm always trying to see what's trending, what people are asking about. And two things popped out the last few weeks, months maybe. The one is context engineering. Everyone spoke about that. Actually, I mean, context engineering kind of superseded prompt engineering. And so what we've seen is that, all of a sudden context became, again, very important. And intent is really just basically the context of the conversation the user wants to have. And we started to think of context as this triangle. So at the bottom, you've got the most wide context, that's the internet. And then you've got organizational context or memory, personal context of previous interactions, and then higher up, this current interaction, what's the context being managed in this conversation. And really, like, memory informs the context. So that's still very important. People are realizing that even though it's an AI agent, it cannot have a conversation without context. So I love the focus on context management all of a sudden. And then secondly, is evaluations. Like AI evals, that's all the rage now. But people are also starting to realize that there needs to be some kind of evaluation. And actually, OpenAI has got a very good study, and they say in the first paragraph, stop the poke and hope strategy. And I just like the approach they have in terms of having like a data flywheel and trying to evaluate, even if it's small chunks of interactions, and see what the results are.
Yes, yeah. And so we're going to use the classic hamburger model here. We're going to fool you in with what's working, and then we're going to smack you with some data. if you have been paying attention, our colleagues at MIT did release a bit of a paper saying, was it 5% deliver value? Before this, the best data I have seen is on digital transformations where 70 to 80% of them succeed. Right? So again, a big chunk of them fail, but now there's an enormous delta between just doing AI, and obviously boards have been rushing to do this. Everyone's been told to figure out AI. There's a lot of instant millionaire software shops there who have just been essentially chaining API calls together and praying that it works until something else comes along. So let's go to the meat of it. Like it's hard, isn't it? Like what explains if these 5-8% of successful estimates are like even correct? What do you think explains some of the failure rates we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to dig into the numbers a little bit in terms of, it's a little bit like you can wait for a pitch to hit a home run, right? And in the financial context, the home run here is unlimited, right? It's not just one run, right? So if you look at some of the successful use cases around the automation piece, right? And automation is really where we see the bread and butter right now, right? And the analogy I always like to use is, if there's a robot that you had in your house and you can have the robot do anything you want, what are you gonna have it do? You're gonna have it wash dishes, do your laundry, take out the garbage. You're gonna want it to do all the things you don't want to do, right? Same thing here, right? You're gonna do all the automation pieces, like Moody's, for example, right? Was able to shrink a 40-hour process to create a credit memo down to 2 minutes, right? And that's a big time savings, right? So very much in the automation space, right? We're still seeing probably 95% of the use cases being deployed, right? And now we're starting to see some of the, the more kind of customer-facing use cases where there's some additional value add. But when you go back to kind of the 5%, look, I think there's a tremendous amount of experimentation in this space, right? So it makes sense that you're gonna have a high failure rate, but the trick there is to, again, be able to very, very quickly identify those use cases where it's not going to succeed and move on, right? But then hopefully the gains that you get from the ones that do succeed are paying for it and making up for it.
Yes.
Just on that, so that study, and that's something Carl alluded to, which I missed initially. For me, that study didn't actually go about, it's not about the failures, it's actually about the shadow AI economy. And I love the fact that they coined that because, they say in the study, employees or workers know what good AI look like. So and Carl also alluded to the whole idea of, we had UX, we had DevX, developer experience, and now we've got AX or AI experience. And we all know what good AI feels like, and we exchange those ideas. So for me, the main thing was that the shadow AI economy, and that it says workers know what good AI looks like and feel like, and they want to use that. And the AI they're being given within the organization, it's not good enough for them. So they're using it, but not officially. And also there's, a lot of dangers around that as well. And it's not being reported as well. So there's no reporting really around that anecdotal use of AI. And maybe just to bookend that, we were at the Gartner IT Symposium in Barcelona a while back. And everyone who works in the sessions, and a CIO came to our booth, and he was shocked. I think he was Norwegian, shocked. And he said the biggest shock for him was standing in the back of the sessions and seeing how many people have ChatGPT and whatever open and uploading documents, right? So there's that danger as well. And then there's a couple of banks that obviously, especially banks, revoke their access. But as we heard in the previous session, you've got to give, you can't just take it away. You've got to give something that adheres to data flow and model use, but it needs to be as good or better. For users to create that stickiness.
Yeah, and so immediately on this topic, there's the idea of top-down innovation. Like, here's Clippy, you use it. And then there's the bottom-up, well, let me see what works best for my context, which the CTO could say it's going rogue. An actual friend of innovation would say, well, that's just how solutions bubble up. It's the Indian jugad version of it. Let me just fix a thing that's broken by fixing a thing with what I have. What are your thoughts on this? Because again, I don't envy any CTO or CIO or CISO at this point, because it must be just so difficult. 2026, 27 can't come soon enough when all of this has been figured out.
But I like reading Anthropic's blog, because it's some of the most grounded content you can find and so honest. When the first session with Raj, he spoke about AGI, and no one speaks about AGI because OpenAI stopped speaking about it. And something I found in the Anthropic documentation is they really speak about, starting small. And it was also mentioned in the previous session, getting a small prototype to work and iterating on that while you have evals along the way to test the input and the output. So I think that's a very important part to start small, get something working, as was mentioned, and then test the feedback from that. And I was reminded years back, there was something called work studies. At least we had it in companies in South Africa, where someone would actually go and study what people are doing every day. Where are they walking? Who are they speaking to? What's happening on their desk? And I feel like almost for AI in the enterprise, you need work studies again to see what are people actually doing on the ground and how can it be optimized.
I'll give you a really, really good example here. There was an article published by VentureBeat on Intuit maybe a couple weeks back. But Intuit, back in 2023, had actually released a chatbot on top of their platform, right? So if any of you use QuickBooks, right, they had a chatbot there. And they thought it was going to be the greatest thing, and it flopped miserably, right? And the reason it flopped miserably was because they had a pretty elegant application already, and then on top of it, you're throwing in chatbot. No one knew what to do with it, right? It was just a blinking cursor there. No one knew, can I trust it? What do I ask, right? So no one used it. And what they did was they actually went back to the customers and they followed their workflows. And what they ended up realizing was some of these customers were taking an invoice from an email and literally copying and pasting that information into QuickBooks. And they said, what a great use case. We should automate this for them. We should just be able to take that email and push the information into QuickBooks. So that's exactly what they did. They looked at what that workflow was and then created a solution, right, using generative AI.
And maybe just on that, the idea of a workflow. So recently, also OpenAI released the architecture of ChatGPT, which was very interesting. I think many people missed that. And also, they released the architecture of the deep research API. And just based on what you said now about the complexity, what I realized looking at the architecture, it was really complex. ChatGPT is a very complex user interface, even though it's a complex machine, even though the UI is so simple. In the previous session, it was spoken about small language models and orchestrating models. And it's so interesting how, with the deep research API of OpenAI and ChatGPT, how they orchestrate small language models. And they use small language models to disambiguate and to improve the prompt before it goes to the main model. So there's lots of complexity. And somehow there's this idea that with AI, you don't need complexity. And I just realized it's really hard and there's lots of complexity to address. And there's a lot happening under the hood, even for those simple interfaces.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear you think about something. I'm sure in the audience you've felt this, or the people in charge of the purchase decisions have thought this. One company CEO that I interviewed for Forbes a couple of months ago said, I am no longer purchasing anything beyond a year. Told everyone that they're fired if they give me a SaaS license for more than 2 years. 1 year max, because it is so complex, but it's getting easier all the time. And if I built something, I gave $5 million for a project, I could purchase it now for $20 plus tokens. And so these are obviously very context specific, and hard things will remain hard, and maybe the build is, when you use it as a secret sauce, it's worth it. But I'd love to hear your thinking on delivering enterprise value and just this kind of anxiety because of how quickly things are evolving.
Yeah, I mean, when you alluded to something that I think often about, I think the projects are too long and too big. You've got to have shorter projects. I think it's way too long, it's way too traditional, and when you get to the end of it, then things change already. So it really needs to be agile in the true sense of the word of being agile. It needs to be very specific, and it needs to be shorter. You know, I mean, we had a customer speak at the Reimagine event in Cologne, and they had a slide of what didn't work for them. And they just said AI agents will not work for them due to various reasons, latency, cost. And then they had a list of things that really worked for them. And one of the best use cases was automated email. It really saved them a lot. But they've got short projects they run. If something fails, they shelve it. And they're not scared to speak about their failures. If something works, then they try and augment it.
I don't have a great answer to the question you just asked right now. I mean, look, it's a problem every organization is dealing with, right? Do I buy a solution? Do I build a solution? Do I do a mixture of both? And look, the one that you mentioned is the easy one is, look, if there's some secret sauce in terms of, you know, taking all the different data sets you have coming in, it makes sense to build your own because you have some proprietary, you know, secret sauce behind that, right? But one area I did want to circle back before around, you know, kind of the whole shadow IT piece of it is that, you know, one of the hedge funds that I worked with, it was interesting because they had developed an environment and they had exposed it to, you know, their entire business workforce, right? And they actually found that a large majority, almost 90-95% of it, actually rejected it. They did a little bit of, you know, Q&A, and they're like, this stuff doesn't work, right? And they ignored it. A very small percentage of people actually believed in it, and the CTO actually worked with that small group to then start building out the POCs, the pilots, and proving it out. And then this group was a mixture of business and technology and data scientists. And then what they did was, once they proved it out, they leveraged the business folks in that small group to evangelize within the company. And then that's actually how they built out the adoption of generative AI. So very often it does, you know, and this wasn't, I wouldn't say this is shadow IT, but very often it does start with a small group to do the evangelization, right? Because you can just expose it to 20,000 people, but 19,000 of them aren't going to know what to do.
I mean, like even in this session today, we were talking about what does this word mean? What does that word mean? So we haven't even decided on the actual, you know, definitions. But I like what you're saying about having like a prototype, and that's experience. You know, so if it's your own experience, that's real, and you know, if it works or not. There's also been a very interesting study on how people use ChatGPT. I don't know if you've seen it released by OpenAI. For me, that was also a great guide to see how people actually make use of it and what they prefer. And obviously, you know, you look at the different modalities. Text was like really used a lot. But I think there's lots of examples, research on how people actually are using it currently.
Correct. Yes. And we do know we are between you and the drinks. So, so one final, doesn't have to be a quick fire round, but you know, just succinct thoughts. Next 5 years, entirely unfair question to ask of anyone. Imagine going back 5 years. November 2022 feels like it's an eternity ago, but true. Agent Force came out in January this year. Like it's just the time continuum has been broken by everything that's happening with AI. But so let's bite it. In 5 years, what do you think we will be talking?
You're gonna throw it on me first?
No, you can choose.
I'll go first. Actually, so I actually just came back from California. I was actually just in a meeting with NVIDIA and Anthropic, and this question came up. So I'll use some of what was said there. So 5 years is a long time, but I think where we're going, a lot of the AI we're talking about today is very much technical AI, where we think we're, you know, at least in this is kind of NVIDIA's vision, right, is it's going to very much go into physical AI. It's going to be around the robotics, right? And they think that we're moving there very, very quickly. Because if you kind of look at the sliver of the kind of the market opportunity, the technology AI is just a very small piece. And we barely even scratch that surface. But when you think about kind of the robotics piece of it and all the different things around, plumbing and fixing your house and your cars and cooking. There was a fintech I met out there that actually has robots doing, working with Michelin star restaurants doing cooking, which was pretty awesome. That's, I guess, a 5-year.
Yeah. And the robot that does the dishes for you.
Oh,
I'll order one right away.
It would be amazing.
Yes.
Just to double click on that, people are saying that AI agents will be the OS of embodiment. So the next step is embodiment, if that's a vacuum cleaner or, like you said, a humanoid. And there'll be something called agent OS that actually runs the agent. But I think secondly, what's going to happen also is that we will have all this power. So we always had a problem of scarcity, and now we've got a problem of abundance. So we're going to have all this power, and we'll try and figure out all the time how to manage and control it. If you think of hallucination, in-context learning, we got RAG. RAG is too limited, we get agentic RAG. Then we've got AI agents, that didn't work, let's try agentic workflows. Now we've got a GPT-5 can actually write code. It's got a code writing function. If you ask it to do something, it can't. And I did this in a notebook. It actually writes the code to do that. So I think we're going to be in this funnel all the time trying to figure out what scaffolding can we use to control and steer the AI.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. And my cop-out answer to this is, whatever it is, we will treat it like Wi-Fi on an airplane. Right? It's a miracle we're flying. Humans are not supposed to have this technology. And the moment it goes out for 1 second, we're cursing, we take it for granted. That is my answer. Thank you. That is our session, and we'll hand it over back.
Yes, thank you.